and talk about outdoor learning. It seems like an appropriate topic. Just a few things before we get started, and I turn it over to the incredibly talented people who've come to share with you tonight. We are recording the session. It will be available on the McDowell Foundation website early next week. We've had a number of people request that we record because they weren't able to make it here tonight. And we do like to archive these so that people can go back and listen to them. So as we get started, I want to acknowledge that I am on Treaty 6 territory, the traditional homeland of the Métis. I know there are individuals joining us from Treaty 4 territory, and I welcome you. I do this land acknowledgement not out of obligation or even because it's the right thing to do, but because I'm deeply committed to reconciliation, as is the foundation. And I hope conversations like tonight only lead to further reconciliation within this territory and within our country. So welcome to all of you. I'm really looking forward to our conversation this evening. Just before I turn it over to Nicole, who's going to share a little bit about her research tonight, that's going to be how we kick it off. I want to tell you just a couple of very small things about the McDowell Foundation if you're not familiar with it. We are a nonprofit charitable organization that funds teacher-led research in the province. Individuals like Nicole come to us with great ideas, and we get to act as support and cheerleader and funder and support some of the amazing work you're going to hear about tonight. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Nicole. She's going to share her own work for her research for about 10 minutes. Then when we come back, we'll introduce the rest of the panel, or more likely have them introduce themselves, and there'll be opportunity for questions. We do ask that you use the question and answer feature on the bottom of your screen. You can just type on it and type in a question. The chat is open, but we hope you keep it more for comments and that kind of thing. It's easier for the moderator if most of the questions come in the Q&A. So Nicole, I'm going to turn it over to you to share your research. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Great. Yeah, thanks so much for coming, everybody. When you do research, you kind of, you hope people will learn about it or read about it, but you don't often get an opportunity to talk about it. So I'm kind of excited tonight, also really nervous. So I might start talking like chipmunk speed. I apologize. There's not really much I can do about it once it gets started, but I'll go ahead and share my screen. That's different. All right, from the beginning. All right, that's the most nerve-wracking part. I'm hoping everybody can see something that says breaking out of the text box. Great. Okay, so the title of my project was Breaking Out of the Text Box, Increasing Outdoor Learning. So just as Ellen did, I also want to acknowledge the place that I inhabit, particularly because tonight we're talking about learning outside on the land. I feel that's particularly important that we acknowledge, or I acknowledge the place that I live, work, and play. I'm located in Saskatoon, which is a part of Treaty 6 territory and the traditional homeland of the Métis. I am constantly reminded when I'm out on excursion how fortunate I am to be in this place, and I feel reaffirmed in my responsibility as a treaty person. So while there are so many different outdoor learning pedagogies, like so many, I found that I connected most strongly with land-based education. This was the guiding pedagogy that I used throughout my project. Although I am non-Indigenous, as a treaty person, I believe that our education system needs to make more space for Indigenous ways of knowing and acknowledge the colonial history of this province. Moreover, I find that land-based learning is the least anthropocentric of all the pedagogies, in my opinion, and I appreciate its emphasis on life being interconnected. I believe that land-based learning provides a tool for reconciliation and a roadmap for sustainability. Okay, so the driving question for my project was, how can we best support teachers to incorporate more outdoor learning into their practice? I've experienced with both very traditional classrooms and then also a variety of outdoor learning programs. And to me, like, there's just no comparison. Outdoor learning has so many rich learning affordances and holistic growth opportunities. And there's so much research as well that supports these statements. The benefits of outdoor learning have been documented for decades. I mean, well, and longer if you think about land-based learning and being in Indigenous ways of knowing, like really since time immemorial, there's been benefits to outdoor learning. Yet I have witnessed minimal engagement in outdoor learning in my school division. I'm outside a lot and I don't often see a whole lot of other classes out there. So I kind of wanted to address this situation and how could we get more classes involved in outdoor learning? So to start off my project, I sent out a division-wide survey in May of 2019, and I asked 5 simple questions to my colleagues, and there was actually just under 70 respondents, which I was pretty happy about. So the survey helped me to recruit for the main part of my research project, which was an action research group. I ended up with 7 participants ranging from pre-K to grade 8, and we met 3 times to work collaboratively. The first 2 meetings took place in the spring of 2019, and we focused on brainstorming solutions and supports that would help them engage in outdoor learning. And then in the summer and fall, I worked on providing them with the materials, resources, and professional development that they thought would be helpful. And then in January of 2020, I don't know why I said that weird, we met one last time to review highlights and challenges. It was supposed to be a mid-session meeting. It ended up being our final meeting because of COVID. And so instead of finishing in the spring of 2020, like we had planned, and meeting one last time, I sent them a final questionnaire just by email. So at the first meeting, we couldn't help but talk about all the benefits of outdoor learning. And so I've put a snapshot of them here, and they mirrored a lot of the same benefits that you'd see in the literature. As well, throughout the projects, barriers came up for discussion, and we tried to work through them as they came up. Factors that stood out were lack of support, so like having enough parents for chaperones, that kind of thing. Student and class challenges, so if you have some behavioral issues, how to address that. Weather, yes, we can't control when it's -40, and then having the time to be able to get outside. That was something people were trying to wrap their head around. So the main focus of our meetings was to brainstorm supports and solutions that could help everybody get outside more often. And so the ideas kind of fell into these 3 main categories. So we have materials on the right, resources on the left, and professional development in the middle there. And some examples of these, let's say for resources, cheat sheets was something they thought was like the most amazing idea. Something that they could take outside that was small and easy to reference so that they had some knowledge of different ecological and social studies kind of thoughts. And something for professional development they were really keen on was getting site tours. So going to different like places within the area of Saskatoon that they could take their students and getting familiarized. And then like in a material that was popular was binoculars. So those are some examples. Thanks to the grant through the Sterling McDowell Foundation, I was able to provide honestly almost all of these things. There's a couple that are still a work in progress at this point, just because we were delayed a little bit with COVID, but they are going to be rolling out soon. Okay, getting into the findings. So these were the things that kind of were the takeaways from the project, the big takeaways. With the survey, I was mostly using it for recruiting, but I was also interested to see kind of what people's level of engagement within the division was. And so there was a lot of interest. Obviously, we had 70 respondents, but there was actually surprisingly low level of engagement. When I asked them how often they went outside, 22% of the respondents said they went out less than 5 times a year with their students. And then you can see, so red is kind of like the worst. And then, the dark green is the best, with 9% saying they went out daily, which is obviously great. I guess I had assumed that people that were responding to a survey about land-based learning would have already been really greatly involved. But I think what this suggested was that there's a lot of interest, but they just need some more support to actualize the integration of this teaching practice. Oh, yeah, there we are. So there are definitely barriers to incorporating new pedagogy for sure. But at times it seemed as though the survey respondents sometimes were a little bit defeatist, with their barriers kind of becoming excuses. Whereas I found that the action research group, so the 7 participants I had, were really highly motivated. And so they came up with lots of creative solutions to solve their problems. Like a really good example was people using the free city transit that's available now, instead of booking a school bus, which costs $120. And that was a way of them avoiding transportation costs. That's like one example of creative problem solving. Now, that being said, although I do think sometimes we have perceived barriers, there's definitely some systemic barriers that make even the most motivated teacher want to give up. Teaching is a super challenging profession, as we all know. And teachers are increasingly asked to do more with less. Many deal with large classroom sizes with diverse needs and limited support. I think that this trend that we're seeing, particularly in the last, little while here, makes teachers hesitant to try anything new, and they want to just default to what they know best, right? When your, classroom is chaotic and you've got a lot on your plate, you just want to keep it simple. So ideally, the larger education power structure would be more supportive of teachers and best teaching practices. So there are many changes that could take place at the ministry level, at the division level, and as far as school-based level as well, that could really support outdoor learning. So enough about barriers though. We really wanted to focus on the highlights, things that the participants found really helpful. So I've kind of grouped them into this kind of holistic diagram because I really do feel like a balanced approach is best for supporting teachers. So initially I had kind of grouped it as mind, body, heart, and soul. Soul was a bit of a stretch though, so I kind of just took those out. So now I would say a holistic approach would be thinking about knowledge, actions, relationships, and worldview. And these were the kind of main categories where we found solutions. And I think all of them combined makes the most powerful professional development. So starting with relationships, having a like-minded community ended up being one of the most valued supports for the group. They talked about it all the time. They appreciated just having the opportunity to meet up with other educators who shared similar values and goals. And the meetings ended up providing a great opportunity for the teachers to connect, to share ideas, highlights, problem solve, come up with solutions, and so on. So this was probably their number one thing, was just having a like-minded community. Additionally, they talked about how they didn't ever really feel confident or knowledgeable enough to lead learning-rich outdoor experiences. They felt like they had to be like biologists or, somebody well-versed in Indigenous knowledge that would be able to, make really rich learning experiences, which for sure you could argue from an inquiry point of view, you can learn alongside your students for sure. But that being said, if they're not going to go out and do these experiences because they don't feel like they know enough, I think that's something that could be addressed. So providing some resources to help them feel more confident and learn a little bit more about some science and social studies topics. Additionally, Indigenous ways of knowing for sure, some exposure and experience, and critical analysis should also be incorporated for sure. So connected to the importance of having a strong knowledge base, the teachers also wanted to have experience and guidance in the field. So this idea of action competency became really prominent. They wanted to have like the different guided tours of outdoor spaces, which I mentioned, and they also wanted someone to come with them on field trips with their class, just to kind of give them that reassurance that someone's there helping them along the way. So this, in the end, a lot of the participants said they felt a lot more confident trying things on their own once they had some support actually in the field. As discussed before, like the idea of motivation, particularly that intrinsic motivation, is so crucial that for teachers to stay committed to the goal of outdoor learning. There's lots of reasons to give up. We have a tough job. So throughout any kind of outdoor learning professional development, I would say you need to really stress the values and benefits of outdoor learning so that people stay motivated. Like, yes, this is something I believe in. I can understand the value. I want this for my students. I'm going to stay committed to my goal. Some of the participants talked about having like a visual reminder in their classroom. So I suggested either putting up like a poster that talks about outdoor learning or have like an antler next to your computer, something that would just kind of keep you motivated to get outside the classroom. So then there were also a couple of general considerations that came out of the research. One thing that the participants kept emphasizing, and I think we can all relate to this as teachers who get inundated sometimes with resources, was just to keep everything very simple and organized. Any resources that are going to be developed for helping teachers in any field has to be just real straightforward, get to the point, get to the meat of the matter, because we are busy and we don't necessarily have time to be searching through tons of resources and tons of literature and reading pages and pages. So they really wanted resources that were kept simple, that were not text heavy. Like one pagers was something they really liked, and I would agree. And then having a place where it's all kind of stored, because there are great things, available within our division, but no one knows where to find them. So that's not super helpful if you have a great resource that can't be found. So having kind of a way of organizing everything in one spot, they also thought would be great. They kept calling it a one-stop shop for like everything that would be valuable. Also, generally, it was apparent from the research that every teacher had different needs and strengths. Like I had a pre-K teacher and I had a grade A teacher. Like obviously the things I provide for them are going to look different. I don't think that the grade 8s necessarily want sand tools. Maybe they would, I don't know. But there would be some differences obviously. And so personalized support obviously is always best. Which is nice when there's an outdoor learning consultant with your division who can provide a little bit more personalized support, depending if they don't have 5 other things on their portfolio. And then also when you can do professional development over time. Obviously, I was pretty lucky. I had, well, just about a year with my participants. And so it was made it so that they were able to try things out, come back, you know, get some feedback, get some more support if they needed it. And it kept them more accountable over, like, you know, because they knew they were going to be meeting up with me again. And they wanted to be able to, you know, share all the great things they had done. Yes, this was also a reoccurring theme that the class kept talking about. Sorry, this is kind of a general, last few slides is called setting up for success. These were some things they talked about being helpful for getting going and in like having success throughout the year. So they really kept talking about the importance of communication. So making it known far and wide, right from the beginning of the school year, that your class is going to be learning outside. Let your students know, your parents know, your families know, your admin know, anyone who's going to be implicated, let them know so that you could maybe get support, you can maybe get some resources, you know, everyone's just on board. Make it like a classroom culture. And when your goals are clear, it's just, you're more likely to get support along the way, right? So that was a big thing that kept coming up. And then also, if they're going to have success throughout the year, students like for sure need to be on board. And I think one thing teachers sometimes forget is that like they don't intuitively know how you want them to behave outdoors. You can't just take them out there and assume that they're going to like, you know, come when you call them or sit, you know, where you want them to, or, you know, stay within whatever boundaries that are in your mind. So there actually needs to be some like prescriptive expectations set up, like, you know, this is the boundary. When I whistle, you should be coming back to me in 10 seconds, so on. Like set up the expectations so that they can have success when they go outside, instead of you feeling frustrated because everyone is running around because they're so excited to be let out of their cage. So that's kind of a key thing that we talked about. And then also the idea of scaffolding. So you don't, if you're going to do wanting to do biking with your students, I wouldn't suggest that you bike to Saskatchewan as your first trip. You know, starting out small, start in the schoolyard, you know, within the confines of a park so that there's no traffic that you need to be worried about. And then you can kind of build up from there. The other component of this too is, you know, understanding that your students come with needs, which all students do. And so if you want to have success with taking all your students outside, sometimes it helps to be, and proactive and to plan for the students that might have some struggles. So one really good example is one of the participants knew she had a student coming up who had autism and would maybe have some struggles outside. So she talked with the family ahead of time, and they made some plans for this individual, including renting them a trike, so that when they were going out on bike trips, they were able to participate because they couldn't ride a bicycle. And then finally, and probably, I don't know if it's the most important, these I feel like we're all valuable, but the idea of sparking excitement at the beginning of the year, you know, just like you kind of want to have a motivational set for your lessons. This is kind of the same idea for the whole year. You want kids on board with outdoor learning, start out with something fun. Take them camping in September. We often wait till the end of the year, but by that point, I mean, it's still great. Everyone's still going to love it, but why take away the team building and the relationship building? You know, why would you wait until the end of the year? Start the year with that. Another thing that the participants really felt helped them out a lot was the materials. So grab and go bag, which is something we talked about, and that's what's in the picture there, was the idea of having just a packed backpack with the things you might need outside, just ready by your door all the time. So whenever the mood strikes or the weather's good or you're feeling like it, you can just grab the bag and out you go. Also, they really liked having field guides and the different learning tools. So things like binos. They felt that those were really beneficial. So planning is not like a shocking revelation that's important for teaching, but it also applies specifically to outdoor learning. If you want to get into outdoor learning, you got to make a plan for it. So, you know, when you're looking at your schedule for the year, think about the times when you have blocks of chunk of uninterrupted time that you could get outside. And if you don't really have time, if it's still early in the year, maybe you could do some juggling with your release teacher or with your admin to make it so you have longer periods of time where it would be easier for you to go outside. And then if possible, set up like a reoccurring day or a plan. Like, you know, if you want to start out small, you want to do once a month, make that your goal. Once a month, at the last Friday of the month, we're going to go outside. Also, the participants really like the idea of think outside first. So when you're planning, don't think, okay, how can I take this art activity outside? That's doomed to fail. Think instead like, okay, I really want to do some art with the students outside, and then, you know, do some Googling. What are outdoor art activities that might work well? It's more likely to have success that way. And the other thing that, again, people talked, or that was something that people don't always necessarily think of, is the idea of nearby nature. Again, field trips are sometimes we think far off places, but your schoolyard has lots of great learning affordances. The nearby park has lots of great learning affordances, community gardens, so on. So think about the nearby locations as well when you're planning for the year. Okay, so my last slide, everybody. For me, the biggest personal growth piece was better understanding what is needed to facilitate land-based learning as a non-Indigenous person. Because this pedagogy comes from Indigenous ways of knowing and is, you know, very much based in Indigenous epistemology, I came to a better understanding of what that would look like for me as a non-Indigenous person trying to facilitate these opportunities for students. So there's a few key points I came up with. One, it's so important to acknowledge your positionality and how that plays out in your teaching practice. Whenever you're visiting a space, you want to think about how to be critically reflective of that space. Think about its history, the power, the accessibility, different variables that were like your position and power can come into play. It's vital that the indigeneity of land-based learning is emphasized. So acknowledging that this is a pedagogy that's based in Indigenous ways of knowing, and to involve elders and knowledge keepers as much as possible. I can't know everything. I can't even necessarily know much about Indigenous ways of knowing, only what I've learned from other people. And so I have to just acknowledge that and bring in people that do know more. And then finally, the land is tied to a colonial history. We know this. It's part of our treaty obligation that we address this colonial history. And that's a big part of engaging in land-based learning as well. And that is the end of that. So I will stop sharing. So that was all I had for the formal presentation. I have other things to share, but I think I'll just share them as they come up in conversation.
Okay. Thank you for that, Nicole. That was amazing research, has left me with lots to take away and a few questions. So on that note, I would like to welcome both Sam Gunn and Marcia Klein, who are joining us on the panel today. Well, they're joining Nicole on the panel today. For those of you that don't know, my name is Nicole Turcotte. I am one of the associate directors here at STF Professional Learning, and I'm here to moderate some questions. I would invite you, please, to share your questions in the Q&A by clicking on that Q&A button that's on your tab, and then I will direct them to our panelists for some answers. There is a question already about getting some research, getting Nicole Turner's research that will be available, I believe, through the McDowell Foundation, and it should be posted shortly. Correct, Nicole? Is it already up on the web or will be posted shortly?
Yeah, there's a couple additional resources that I was just getting finished up now that will kind of be posted at the same time as I post my research summary. So I'm thinking maybe end of March is probably the most realistic, where everything will be posted on McDowell website.
Excellent. Okay. So before we get started with our questions, I'd like to ask Sam and Marcia to introduce themselves. So Sam, would you like to get us started?
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much for inviting me to come and chat tonight. I'm so humbled to be sitting with these amazing women on this panel. And I guess just really briefly, like my role is as a consultant with Saskatoon Public Schools. And right now I'm working at the Brightwater Center. And so Marcia Klein, people often refer to her as the heart and soul of Brightwater, still to this day. And so a lot of the work that I do presently is really inspired by Marcia's work, and as well as other teachers in Saskatoon Public that mentored me. So I hope that I can represent them all well today and maybe offer some insights for the folks that are with us. So thanks again.
Marcia, would you like to take a few minutes to introduce yourself?
Hello, it's fantastic to be part of this panel. Great to hear Nick do her presentation, Nicole, and great to see you, Sam. And there's a wonderful group of people that have joined. So thank you so much for taking your time. I'm currently working with Sask Rivers Public School Division. I teach grade 4 French immersion at Vickers School. And Brightwater is still in my heart, that's for sure. And Nicole and I go way back because she used to be part of the Ecology Kids Camp at the University of Saskatchewan. And so when I think about outdoor education and that passion for being outside and learning outside, you know, to introduce myself, as a little girl, I think I was 7 or 8, somebody said, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" And I looked up at the person and I said, "A nature lover." And fortunately, that's been a career. And I think it's what do we believe, and what we believe will do it. And so I suppose if we come away with one thing from this panel experience is, you know, let's get outside, let's play, because we teach who we are. That's Parker J. Plummer, right? And the more that we can get inspired, if we do it, we'll do it with our kids. We will. So again, thank you so much.
Thank you. So another panelist that we have joining us is also Elizabeth Hutton from STF here. And Elizabeth, I would invite you to introduce yourself. And Marcia did such a great job of talking about why she's passionate about outdoor learning. So introduce yourself and share why you might be personally interested in this nature-based education.
Thanks, Nicole. Welcome, everyone. My name is Elizabeth Hutton. I'm a senior admin staff person at the Saskatchewan Teachers Federation. I am in my 27th year of education, 3 years with the Federation, and I am not an outdoor ed teacher, and I am no longer a classroom teacher. However, I did raise a youngster who would have done far better had he had access to land-based education than he did do in a classroom. Nicole, I noticed something on the screen that you put up earlier, and I wrote it down. Seeing yourself in relation to the world. And my son really did identify with the world around him. He was an ADHD youngster who also had some learning disabilities, and sitting in a desk and reading a textbook was very, very difficult for him, but he could grasp concepts much easier when you put him outside and helped him learn it. Not just in the open space, but also using nature as the foundation for his learning. So I wish he had access to some of what you shared tonight. Since coming to the Federation, I have had the opportunity to work with a wonderful project that is a land-based experience, and that's with Wanuskewin Heritage Park. There is a teacher resource that will be coming very shortly in the next few weeks. That is a partner project between Wanuskewin and the Indigenous Resources Review Committee, which is a group of teachers that I had the opportunity to work with the past 2 years. And it is a set of lessons for pre-visit and post-visit, as well as an opportunity to go out and visit with the baby bison and the grown bison that were, the babies were born last April, so they're about a year old now. And spend some time on the land out there with the guides and the Wanuskewin staff. So that's what I'm here to share with you tonight. So thank you for your work.
That sounds amazing. And it's that bringing together the excitement and the student engagement and connecting that with curriculum is such a delicate balance. Nicole spoke about that a bit in her presentation. I wonder if we can dive a little deeper into that. So when introducing our students to nature, where is that balance between imparting that information and teaching curriculum and encouraging the joy and wonder of learning? Sam or Nicole, would you be interested in answering that one?
Sure. And then Sam should talk. First, I also want to just talk about Sam and Marcia. I know from before, and they both undersell themselves. Elizabeth, I've just met, but I also have no doubt she's amazing. Sam forgot to mention that she taught outdoor school, which is a grade 11 program at Marion Graham for 10 years, Sam. So she's got a fair amount of experience in the field. And Marcia Klein ran ecology camp for kids, which was all sorts of land-based programming. And she also ran Brightwater. And she also worked as a park interpreter in PA National Park, and she was also my first inspiration for getting outside and doing environmental learning when I was a student in the same school where she taught. She taught my sister, not me, but she led the environmental club. So I often give her credit for sparking my interest in the outdoors. So I had to just give them a few more props because they're just too awesome. But also, yes, back to the question. The balance between info and joy and wonder. So to me, they're just like not separate. Like I feel like you take kids outside and you just can't help but inspire this love of nature as well as learn lots while you're out there. So I don't think you even have to really try to have a balance. I would say you only need to try to have a balance if you're thinking you're going to take your worksheets and your workbooks just outside and then sit there and try to do that outside. You could do that. And I still think you get some benefits, you get some fresh air, you get some sunshine and so on. But I think you're kind of taking away from the natural elements that you can learn from when you just engage with your surroundings. And an example I like to provide, I mean, I'll give a simple one and I'll give a more maybe less doable for everybody. But when I take our students to Wanuskewin, we've met up with a medicine woman there before, and she's taken us out on the land, and she talks about the different plants as we come across them and their value and the stories behind them and the healing properties and so on. And like my students are fully invested and they're not looking anywhere else. So not only is she teaching them amazing things about health and sustainability and so on, but they're also just getting a greater connection with the natural world around them. And then after the fact, we'll give them some solo time where they'll find a spot to themselves and they'll be able to just reflect on the day's learning and also just really connect to the space that they're in. So again, it's just like, I don't know how you separate the two. I feel like they just go so hand in hand. And then that would be like an excursion-based experience, but even just simply like the idea of taking your books outside for silent reading. Like if you're just getting started, you just want to get your feet wet. There's just something about, feeling the grass on your toes and feeling the sun on your face and getting the fresh air and all those great things that you get from just being outside, just by being there. So even if you're leery about getting started and you're worried about hitting academics, well, take the silent reading outside. You're still doing academics, but they're getting the benefits of being outdoors.
Fantastic. That sounds like a few really simple ways to start incorporating it into our teaching actively. Sam, I wonder if you would continue on with that. And I noticed a question in the chat about incorporating senior curricula. So I wonder if you could speak directly to that.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I think I would echo Nicole's sentiments that a lot of the joy and the learning come together naturally. And I think they only come apart if we force them to. And if we're intentionally going out and trying to mitigate the joy and bring it down. Because otherwise, there is just something that I think most people can connect with and find joy in when we go outside. And I think it's one of those teacher moves too, that becomes really fluid the more you do it. The same way in your indoor classroom, what's the balance between building relationships and joy, in working with a group of kids and teaching curriculum? Well, maybe at first it's clunky and you're a little curriculum heavy, but as you progress and do it more and more, it becomes more fluid. As far as the senior curricula go, I saw that psychology was one class that was mentioned, as well as ELA. I've never taught psychology, but ELA is one of my favorite things to teach in the outdoors, because we can use it as a means to communicate about anything, what we're seeing, what we're feeling, what we're reading. And I always used to think of it with a really old model. I don't know, Nicole and Marcia, maybe you remember if it's Donaldson and Donaldson from way back, in, about, and for the outdoors. I think that was them. But just kind of thinking about the different ways that we can interact with the outdoors. And so the idea of being in the outdoors, maybe it's just a classroom. Maybe instead of sitting in your desk, you're taking the novel that maybe doesn't make reference to being outside at all, and you're just sitting by a tree and reading it. Maybe if you're going into that idea of learning about the outdoors, you're choosing texts that have information about the place that you live in, about nature itself, about contemporary issues to do with climate change. And if you want to take it to that, idea of being for nature, I know there's lots of great English teachers in Saskatoon that are doing advocacy work through their ELA classes. So, maybe you find an issue related to an environmental issue that you want your kids to rally around and learn more about. And so they do some research, they find some texts, and they do some writing to advocate for that issue. So I think the possibilities are endless. And I just find having a tool to kind of organize my thoughts like that in, about, and for, just helps me kind of focus and try new things.
Okay.
I also just do have a comment about psychology. I've never taught psychology 30. I'm not even to pretend. I've never done high school, so take this with a grain of salt. Our class, they get to do dream projects in the new year. They pick what they're interested in and what they want to learn more about, and then they kind of lead the learning. Well, they do lead the learning. And I know one of our groups is interested in youth mental health, and so this made me think about psychology here, but they're really focusing on wellness and like the idea of mindfulness. And so they've incorporated into their unit plan that they want to spend lots of time outside to do like meditative practices, to do solo time, to do just immersing yourself in nature as a way of mental health. And so I think that you could probably look at like those concepts of mindfulness and, reconnecting with nature. I mean, you can find lots of research on that being good for mental health, and maybe you can incorporate that into your psychology content. Again, I'm not familiar with the curriculum, but just something that popped in my head.
Can I jump in on that?
Absolutely.
So I think we can get a little bit into the barriers a little bit. Sometimes what happens is before we go outside, we're thinking, okay, I know I really want to go outside. I know it'd be good for the kids. We're all going crazy. We've got to get out. It's been indoor recess or full moon, pick a reason. And so we've got to get outside. And so just like the movie, baby steps, just take baby steps. But before we take that baby step, we got to know we can keep our little ducklings together, or else we're herding cats. And so knowing that you've set the parameters with the kids. Okay, guys, when my arm goes up, you need to be back with me by 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. And if that kid isn't back, hey, you get to do 10 push-ups or whatever. Gradually, they know if your arm's up, I don't even whistle. My arm's up, I have my kids back. I need to know that from a safety perspective. And then they get the hang of, oh yeah, right. Here's this new thing. She's got up her sleeve. Let's go and do this crazy thing. And so whenever I'm going outside, I think, okay, what is it I'm trying to do? What's my point? Where am I going? And it's not just to go to the playground and crawl around on the playground. That has its merit, but what's my purpose, right? And so thinking, coming back to the psychology, right? All of our kids, we need to make sure we're supporting the whole person, right? The head, the heart, the spirit, and the mind. And so doing things like initiative tasks, right? Doing some kind of challenges where they can, COVID safe, of course, right? But they can do some challenges. Maybe it is walking on a balance and they're supporting each other. Maybe it's, we can't set up ropes and they're jumping over a rope course. But one of the things, actually, you know what? I was playing with my mask just before this presentation, and I was thinking, like, what do we do with masks after COVID? I think it can be a blindfold. But the other option is buffs are fantastic. And if the kids all bring their own buff and they're COVID safe, they can do whatever they want on the blindfolds. So having fun little tools like this, say, okay, you guys, we're gonna go out. We're gonna do a little bit of blindfold walk, and they can grab elbows because we can elbow each other and go out and just take away 1 sense. So that's a baby step. It's the first thing. Okay, I got all my kids back, and that's not a big purpose. We're not trying to do a whole big thing on climate change. It's just a little tiny thing. So there's that step. And then something else, Kim Archibald and a whole bunch of us with Saskatoon Public Schools wrote a document called Best Place. And so again, it's sitting there and saying, where's the best place to learn? And it might be in the classroom, but it might be outside in the playground. It might be at that field on the pathway. It might be on the sidewalk in the neighborhood or the nearby park. It doesn't have to be a big trip. Often we think outdoor education is only the big place, and that's not necessarily it, right? So yeah, just thinking about little tiny steps. And if you look in the curriculum, it's in the curriculum. Like there's all sorts of things around mindfulness and yoga, and why not do yoga in the snow? Why not take all the snow chunks that still exist and try to make art with found objects, you know, making the nookshucks that still exist. So there's lots of ways to think kind of divergently. And as far as resources, the Emma Stewart Resource Center is loaded. So, you know, if you're sitting there thinking, what am I going to do? The internet is huge too. That's not it. It's how can I take these little tiny baby steps, have that confidence, take the risk. Your kids will be happy. All your ADHD kids will go, finally, thank you, Teach.
Awesome. Marcia, you mentioned in your talk about some COVID safe activities and making sure that we're being cautious about this. So currently there's been a lot of talk about getting students outside as part of teaching through this pandemic. So how has this impacted understandings and practices of outdoor learning in your schools? And what, if anything, have you been doing differently this past year? Who wants to start that one off? Marcia, you look like you're ready to jump the gun. Want to respond to that?
So I haven't taken the kids skating because I have to tie all my grade 4 skates, but we went out snowshoeing, and that's been a fantastic experience. And you know what? All the shops in the cities, they're selling snowshoes like crazy. You can also get them from the Wildlife Federation for free. So you just can sign up and get those. We can give you contact how to get those. But taking the kids out and doing that kind of thing before all the snow goes, what a great experience for them, right? Because that's lifelong learning. They can snowshoe till they're 99, right? From 9 to 99. And even they have little cute, tiny snowshoes, right? So little people can go out as well. So that's one thing. And as far as things that have changed, they know 2 meters. We can be far away from each other. They mask up. We're fine. Like we still go out. We'll still do our walk. So as far as changes, it's just, yeah, the kids know they're pretty resilient and flexible.
Okay.
I actually was thrown for a loop. I mean, initially with the pandemic, I should say, because for the beginning of the year, it was fine. I mean, the weather's nice. We're on our bikes a lot. And so we're very mobile. In the winter months, we used to take the Saskatoon Transit. That wasn't an option anymore once the pandemic hit. And we also did a lot of community-based learning. So we were in old folks' homes and pre-K classrooms and Friendship Inn and so on. And so I found that the fall was fine. If anything, we did emphasize going outside more because of the pandemic. You know, it definitely was a reinforcing factor to like, let's go out every day as long as we can. So we're not breathing each other's stale air. So I would say in the fall, we were out tons on our bikes. And then as soon as the snow hit, it was kind of like, okay, reevaluate. Normally we do all these community-based things and we use the city transit. Now what are we going to do? So I definitely found that we had to shift more, like there was some creative thinking for sure. And we shifted more to more kind of a traditional outdoor ed program in that we were doing more phys ed opportunities outside. So like Marcia, we rented some snowshoes. We did some cross-country skiing. Actually, we did cross-country skiing a few times. Ice fishing out at Blackstrap. We actually got some hides. Like we're based in a really cool school, which is a pre-immersion school, and great people on staff that are able to organize these great opportunities for real, authentic land-based learning. So we've done some hide scraping. We did that outside. And so it was definitely, I found we were doing more phys ed. And then I also tried to get inventive, and I was trying to get math outside more often. That was something that even EcoJustice, that's the program I'm with now. It's a grade 8 outdoor ed social justice program. That was something they always just said, you know what, math is just business. we're just getting it done. And I kind of get where they're coming from, because they have so many big other things going on. So that's fine. And I'm fine with that. But then I was like, you know what? It's COVID. We need something new going on. So I was experimenting with taking math outside, and honestly, it went really well. So now it was just for me personally, this was a year of learning how to kind of let go of old practices and trying to adjust to new for math in particular. So it's definitely been interesting. It's definitely sparked some new ideas. Oh, and I want to say, Marcia, the blind masks do work for blindfolds, because we did the blind trust walk the other day. The students were supposed to have toques. They didn't, some of them. So then they were like, we'll just use our masks, and it worked. So, yep.
Sam, do you have anything to chime in here?
Yeah, I would, like in my role, I don't have a class full of students. I'm working with students that come out to Brightwater and occasionally going and consulting in schools and working with classrooms. And the biggest thing I've noticed with COVID is just a total shift in the support for outdoor education. And, I have worked with some really supportive administrators in the past. But generally you feel a bit like you're pushing rope, trying to get people to get outside, and people kind of look at you as a special kind of weirdo, maybe that likes to go outside with their kids. And this year it just became a lot more normal, which was great. It kept me super busy, but it's been really, really exciting to see people stretching their comfort zone. And the best thing I think that's come out of it is there's, I would say generally a more physical and visceral understanding of what outdoor ed is about. So you can explain it to someone, you can talk about the benefits, but I think there's just so many more people who are trying to get outside more often, that have a better understanding of, what it takes, what's challenging about it, but also the immense benefits and affordances that it has.
So earlier, Nicole was talking about taking the bus and using a lot of the community resources. And in her talk, she mentioned some barriers to getting students outside. So I'm wondering about how those barriers would differ between high school and elementary, or inner city, a suburban or a rural environment. How do those barriers differ between those different environments, and what might a teacher do to address and reduce those barriers? Who wants to take a stab at that one? I don't know. Sure, you want to start with that?
Sure.
Go ahead.
I'd be happy to talk about high school and elementary, because I've got one foot in each world all the time. Biggest barrier for high school teachers, well, there's two. One is the schedule. So during COVID, it's a little bit different, but typically you have your kids for an hour every day, which makes it really difficult to travel, really difficult to transition from indoor to outdoor. And the other barrier is that high school students can't dress for the cold generally. They're so bad at it. They always look so cute and fashionable, but man, oh man, it is really difficult to get a whole class dressed well. And so, as a high school teacher, even working in outdoor school, we would get kids showing up in flip-flops in the winter. And so just having a chest of drawers in your classroom that's just full of stuff from Value Village, get some cheap polyester and a bunch of wool socks, and have that available for students. And as far as the time goes, it's more challenging, but some creative solutions that I've seen would be, like Nicole suggested, seeing if you can reschedule your day, so that maybe you have a team teacher who you take on 2 classes together, so that you have a whole morning or a whole afternoon to head out together. But with COVID, most schools are working in a quint system and working in blocks, and they have a whole morning or afternoon now. So that's shifting a little bit this year.
Awesome. Marcia, I know you've taught in both urban environments and rural, or somewhat more rural. Have you noticed a difference in the different places where you've taught?
It's not necessarily like the kids bring whatever, it's experiences of the kids, right? And so what their background experience is, and that's their comfort level. right, I've got grade 4s right now. So I'm in the classroom, and traditional classroom, if whatever that means. But right, we just throw our snow pants on and away we go. But it depends on the school. I know when I was at Brightwater, I had dozens of boots and snow pants and toques and everything else because we were there for 3 days overnight. We had to make sure the kids were safe. So the other thing is sometimes kids learn, right? Oh, right. Maybe a bunny hug isn't what I should wear tomorrow because my teacher said we're going to go outside. And so that again, lifelong learning. So it just depends. Having said that, to cause a child to feel uncomfortable, and that comes on to, kids can layer up. That's good outdoor education practice.
I just add on. I guess my experience would be kind of, I'd have never really taught suburban per se, but I had some variety of income levels in the schools that I've taught at. The school I'm at now is more of a inner city community school. The students in my program aren't necessarily, depending on what school they came from. So we attract students from around the city. And then I've taught at schools that have a large immigrant population, or I've taught at schools that, a French immersion that are bringing in kids from Rosewood or Briarwood or so on. So I've had a variety of students from a variety of socioeconomic backgrounds and cultural diversity as well. And I think there's a few differences that can kind of pop up. Socioeconomic, we've kind of talked about the clothes sometimes being a factor, right? Like you just maybe don't have the funds to have a really nice winter coat or boots or so on. And kind of like Sam and Marcia have mentioned, like if you can start a stockpile of secondhand things that are just backups for whenever you need them, that's one thing. A couple of people in my group actually had good suggestions as well. They said if you have a school supply list, this is kind of an elementary thing, at the beginning of the year, add a wish list at the bottom and star it as like optional, and then put, if you have spare, even secondhand snow pants or old snow boots or spare mitts, like our class is happy to take those as donations, because sometimes you'll have a wide variety in your class. You'll have families that have money to burn or extra clothes that they're willing to donate, and they might be able to provide it for your class. So that's kind of one option for getting extras. And then the other thing that I've always done is the lost and found at the end of the winter season, when it's about to be shipped off to like Valley Village or wherever, because nobody's claimed it, they've tried their best. That's when I go in and I just rate it. Anything that matches, like, okay, here's a pair of mitts, here's a pair of bunny hug, looks like it might fit my students. Take it home, throw it in the wash, and now you've got a set of backups. So that's a couple ways for that. As far as cultural barriers, this does come up sometimes in an urban setting, right? When you have large immigrant populations. Like I said, I've taught at a school that had a fair amount. And obviously a language barrier can be a issue sometimes, but I mean, that's something that teachers just in general have to figure out, like not necessarily just specifically for outdoor learning. So you come up with your strategies, right? So maybe you try your best to communicate with the family, asking them if they have a friend or a family that might be able to come with them to meet with conferences, or to chat on the phone if you want to explain an important outdoor excursion or whatever. Because oftentimes I find immigrant communities are really well, not always, but often have a community that they can pull from. Maybe there's someone else they know that has a bit better of a language grasp that could help you out. I've also Googled with Google Translate, that didn't come out right. But anyways, I've also used Google Translate on occasion, and I'm sure it's probably not great, but at least I feel like it gave the family an idea of what was happening in the classroom. It was Vietnamese, so honestly, it probably was like really wrong. But I feel like even if there was some key words they could pick up from the message, at least I've tried to give them some more information. And then the other thing too is interpreters. Our school division, at least in the city, and it might be, I'm sure, different in different divisions, but there often are a team of interpreters they can call upon if you need some help translating. So sending off an email to your admin or to your superintendent, hey, is there somebody I could contact for translating for Vietnamese or so on? And then besides language, the other thing I sometimes see come up is just straight cultural, right? Like if you're from a country that's really, really hot, you come to a country that's really, really cold, the cold is scary, right? It is a danger factor. Like I can see my breath when I go outside. What does that mean? Am I smoking from the inside? Like, I don't understand. Like, it's scary because it's just new, right? And I only say that because I had a family say that to me once, that like that was their experience. They got off the plane and they thought they were like smoking because they could see their breath. And so sometimes families don't even send their kids to school on colder days, and that could be -20 or -10. So it's encouraging them, and it's that communication piece, right? Like sending out messages saying, hey, yeah, totally, it's cold. I appreciate that. We are really super safe in our class. I never go out without every student having mitts and toques and fully dressed. And we're going to go only just out in the schoolyard. We're going to come back in every 20 minutes to warm up, whatever you need to do to reassure them and let them know you've thought about the risks and that you're not being, frivolous. You are thinking about them. I find can go a long way to reassure people. They're just not comfortable with the cold yet. Yeah, so those were some things I thought about when we're thinking about different dynamics you might have in an urban setting.
So again, it comes down to that communication and the importance of communication that you mentioned earlier. So at times teachers are asked to communicate sort of the importance of outdoor ed, or to justify, give some proof of learning. Are there other ways that you might document that communication so that parents not only know their kids are safe, but actually know that they're learning? Give suggestions of how you might document. So Marcia?
Yeah, you know what? The kids have access to, a lot of kids have tablets now and phones. And so I asked my students to bring their phone with them. It's charged, and they know all the rules and expectations of using their phone and what to do, but they'll take it out and we'll document. And there's so many great apps, right? They can do a pic collage and they can do videos, and there's lots of ways we can use technology outside. There's lots of great apps like iNaturalist, and there's wonderful ones. That's a whole other webinar, okay? But there's lots of stuff we can do, right? But as far as documenting, Nicole and Sam have both mentioned the idea of getting outside and doing that documenting simply by old-fashioned thing, pen and paper, sit and draw. That's what the artists always did. Find your sit spot. And by the way, we use the word sit spot. What that refers to is going out and sitting down, taking that beautiful time out, that mindfulness, bring yourself in and pause. And being there and being present. The kids can bring out the sit-upons, they can sit on their toque for what it's worth. And then they can do some sketching. And what happened in my class was the kids went out, they drew a tree and they drew the lollipop thing. And one of my boys was just doing a beautiful job, and David taught everybody how to draw a tree like it looks. So what an incredible experience that is. So who becomes the teacher? The guide on the side, right? And so there's lots of ways, right? We want the kids to talk, we want them to listen, we want them to write, to represent, to view this. So there's lots of ways to communicate. And so once we start thinking like that, thinking in that holistic way, all of a sudden the barriers start breaking down. And the wall of my classroom just goes.
Wow. Anyone else want to chime in on that communication?
Yep. So a couple things. I would definitely agree with Marcia 100%. Use the tech. When I did kindergarten, I was like paparazzi. Like, okay, we're documenting this so that I can prove to parents that we're doing good stuff outside and they're learning. Like, kid just drew an A on the sidewalk with sidewalk chalk picture. And then, there's all these tools now, especially during the pandemic, we're familiar with Seesaw or whatever that you're using to share with families, which is great because it keeps them in the loop. And then they know on a day-to-day basis all the awesome things their kids are doing and learning outside. So for early years, I love doing that. And I like Marcia's right. When you get into the older grades, they start having their own phone. So now they can do their own documenting, and that's way easier for the teacher. But then also, I was just going to say for more formal stuff, Eco-Justice is the only kind of outdoor ed experiential program in the Greater Saskatoon Catholic Schools Division. And so for a long time, particularly at the beginning, they were constantly having to prove themselves, like providing evidence of like, I swear this is a good thing, like we're doing good stuff here. So they got into a habit before conferences, before reporting periods, kids have to put together what we call our CCs. And so they have to go through the curriculum and they have to identify the ones that we've hit through our different learning experiences. They don't have to do all of them. We usually say like one per subject area or two, depending on how we're feeling. And so they would say, okay, well, for example, I know we hit the watersheds component of science because we went out and we walked the riverbank with Elizabeth McCauley, and she talked about the importance of riparian zones, whatever. And then they'll write that. So they'll pick out the actual outcome, and then they will write the commentary of how they feel they addressed it in the programming. And then that is shared with families. So the kids themselves say, look, here's the curriculum we've covered and here's how we did it. And then the other thing is, then they write an eco essay, which is kind of more not curriculum based, but as a whole person, what did you take out of this term? So they think more mind, body, heart, and soul. So they talk about their relationships. They talk about their connection to God. We're in the Catholic school division. They talk about how they feel like they've grown physically. Like I had 2 kids this year who didn't know how to ride a bike. They both can ride bikes now. One kid didn't tell me he didn't know how to ride a bike, and he kept crashing, and I didn't know why. And he says, well, this is my first time on a bike. I was like, oh God, okay, that's fair. So then they write this essay about their holistic growth, and then we share that with families as well. So like they themselves are providing the evidence, and then usually we have a public platform like a blog or something where we'll highlight student work, including eco essays or CCs and anything else that we think is cool that parents might want to see.
Wow. We have a question in the chat, so I'm going to actually direct this to Elizabeth specifically, and then while the others think about their answers. So the question is, aside from engaging elders, are there any resources you would recommend for adding Indigenous content to outdoor education? So I'll give Elizabeth a chance to talk a little bit more about her resource while the others are thinking about their suggestions.
Actually, I would recommend resources, for example, like the Muskrats and Fire project that was a McDowell project 2 years ago, I believe, Renee Carrier's project. And that's a children's book that can be used all the way through elementary science, all the way through to high school environmental science, and it's available through McDowell. And then I would also suggest, Brent, the Indigenous Resources Review Committee that was a working committee at Federation. On the ministry curriculum website, there is a filter for the STF IRRC group, and many of the things that those teachers reviewed and work with are outdoor sort of resources, including access to elders and relationship building pieces and those sorts of things. And those can all be found on the ministry curriculum website.
Thank you. So Sam, would you have some suggestions?
Yeah, you bet. Online, there's an awesome database that it just came up in the last year. It's NCCIE, and I believe it's the National Center for Collaboration in Indigenous Education. And they've got a ton of recorded webinars and videos, in addition to lesson plans that are curriculum linked and super easy to search, and you can filter them so you can look specifically for resources that are tagged with a land-based tag, and that'll lead you to activities that are meant to be taught on the land. And I believe it's K to 12, certainly spans elementary and high school. And I think that is just the best resource other than people. Natural Curiosity is another resource that's great. They've been doing a webinar series lately. I think it's a 4-part series, and they've done 2 or something like that. And those are on my list to join every time. They also have a guide that you can purchase. And the focus is bringing Indigenous ways of knowing into environmental and outdoor education. And I find it's elementary focused. There's not all that in there for the high school students, but excellent elementary resources. And then the last one, especially for high school, it's not a lesson plan or a curriculum linked resource by any stretch, but the book Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer. We have a book club going in Saskatoon Public, just talking about bringing together ways of knowing. And this is certainly coming from a settler perspective, someone who's trying to incorporate a worldview that's not my own. That book has been really valuable in just identifying really concrete ways that science and Indigenous knowing are braided together, and helping me to find pathways to search for other resources. So those are my 3.
Excellent. Marcia, did you have some suggestions?
Yeah, I was walking around my classroom. So using literature. So this is Raven Steals the Sun. That's by Gerald McDermott. And then Sharing a Legend. Also, this one is Roy Henry Vickers, and he's got his gorgeous artwork as well. And so starting with an excellent book, a piece of literature, and I call that an everybody book because it can go K to 12 and beyond. And so using beautiful literature as a jumping off part to, okay, well, where is the sun right now? And what is happening? What's the story that was going on? And then I found this actually links for like our latitude. This is from NASA. I know it looks funny, but this is actually a sundial. And if the kids follow instructions, heavens, right? They follow the instructions, they do it in the right order, put their pencil in, and then they can make, and it's just printed off the website, they can make a sundial. And so then what they're doing is we're connecting Western science with a First Nations worldview of why the sun is where it is and what's its function. So literature is a great way to start out. There's another website that's wonderful. It's the Gift of Language and Culture, and that was developed in L'Orange. And so the kids can Google the words, and the elder will actually say wapus, wapus. And so the kids will learn the words, and then they can begin to go outside and name the words because the elder has taught them. They can go outside and name the plants or name the animals, name the tracks. And so that's a wonderful local resource. And there's lots more that we could load on as well.
Awesome. Nicole, do you have other suggestions you want to add to this list?
A couple of mine were similar to Sam's, but I thought I could maybe share my screen real quick just to show a couple things. So can everyone see right now on Saskatchewan Indigenous Cultural Center? Yes. Okay. So this website sometimes posts things that like cultural programs sometimes that you can join into. Like I've booked storytellers through them before that were awesome, and they came to the school and gave presentations, and they were really good. So sometimes, like, if you can follow or just check out different, like, so the SICC or SCC or OTC, like the Office of the Treaty Commissioner and Saskatoon Tribal Council, like, often if you can follow them or check them out on their websites, they'll have cool opportunities that are popping up all the time that you can sometimes, especially during COVID, you can often jump in on virtually. The other thing, I just want to show the website that Sam was talking about. I like this one a lot too. There's some really cool resources. So this is the National Center for Collaboration on Indigenous Education. And then they have a resource library. And then within that, there are specific teacher there's a teacher resource over here. Click the wrong one. But yes, you can look by grade, and there are all sorts of lesson plans on these kind of subjects, which are, like, there's some really good ideas in there. I just wanted to just show the website. And natural curiosity was something that Sam also mentioned. This is a workshop that's being hosted by Sask Outdoors, and it's the importance of Indigenous perspectives in children's environmental inquiry. And so if you are looking for another PD or learning opportunity, this is when you can jump on March 15th coming up here. Sask Outdoors is something, this is not on top, sort of on topic. This was going to be a place or an organization I was going to plug if you're looking for more professional development or a like-minded community. They often have even just events for meeting other people that are the same interests, but they have all sorts of professional development opportunities that I'll just quickly show. These are Canadian Wildlife Federation programs that have been developed that they host. So Below Zero, Flying Wild. So Below Zero is all winter lessons and ideas. Flying Wild's birds, Getting Little Feet Wet for early years, wetland focused activities, and so on. I don't need to go through all of them, but honestly, they're all pretty good. Even just the opportunity to come, well, we're not coming together in person anymore, but virtually, just to meet other people and get some ideas and to hear the different lesson plans and activities. I find them helpful. And they also come with a really thick resource, like a big book of, which in my opinion is a little text heavy, but if you can skim it, you can get some good ideas out of it. So Sask Outdoors is someone that I follow on Facebook and so on, because they do often post really cool upcoming professional development or other interesting resources and things like that. And then Sorry, I just can't remember what I was going to show you. Oh, this book. So I think the other thing with incorporating Indigenous ways of knowing, from what I understand, from what I've learned from other people, is that it doesn't necessarily have to be explicitly something Indigenous per se. Like, it doesn't have to necessarily be hide scraping, or it doesn't necessarily have to be menacing collecting. Like, just the concept of getting outside onto the land in itself is a way of incorporating Indigenous ways of knowing, doing things with your hands. And so I think I wouldn't worry too much about, or I mean, certainly like incorporate all these other amazing things and make sure you are including some specifically Indigenous content. But I think also there's some great value in just getting outside with your students and doing things. And so having resources like this, don't buy it from Amazon. Turning the Tide, which is a great local bookstore in Saskatoon, has this book. Aboriginal Plant Use in Canada's Northern Boreal Forest talks about the different Indigenous uses of plants that you'd find here in Saskatchewan. I know it says Northern Boreal Forest, but there is still some overlap with things you would, well, actually depends where you're from. Maybe this is really applicable for you. If you're in Southern Sask, this is still applicable. There's definitely still some plants you'd find around here. And it's just a way of getting on and exploring on your own, seeing what you can find. And then you can also pull on the information that's in this book to add a little bit more of that kind of Indigenous ethnobotany, like uses of the plants. And then, oh, one other thing I was going to plug is Think Indigenous is a really cool, I couldn't pull it up fast enough, but they are mostly on social media at this point, but they have all sorts of cool podcasts and webinars and resources, and they post about conferences and all sorts of like great Indigenous themed resources. And so that's a group I would recommend following on Facebook, Think Indigenous. It's Chris Scribe, who used to be the leader of ITEP. And then also one of the guys who I teach with at my school, who's like an up and coming land-based learning educator. They've put together some really cool stuff on Think Indigenous. That's just what I had. I will stop sharing.
Wow, so many fantastic resources.
And I jump in with one more resource. So
For sure.
this can go any direction. So it can take a First Nations, Métis worldview. It's more strategy. And I don't know if this is going to show up on my phone because, but Sharing Nature with Children by Joseph Cornell. He has a website. You can take a little training with him if you want. Some of the activities are online, but this book is worth its weight in platinum because what it is, it's a holistic bunch of wonderful activities. And we'll share this, but anyways, it's a bunch of wonderful activities that can be done. So an example is a blind trust walk. Another example is where a little predator prey game. They're very, very simple, easy to get into. And then sitting back and saying, okay, wait a minute, I'm doing this. I've got to teach my learning outcomes. It's report card time. What data am I going to be gathering? How can the kids show me that they've learned something? And so sometimes, again, like I say, baby steps, just starting with something like that. And again, these activities, if the kids have never been outside, they're at square one. And it doesn't matter if they're kindergarten or grade 12. They're learning how to be outside and they're learning how to have that experience and how to develop that, oh my goodness, right, the sun starts over there and it lands over there. It's all those types of things that we want the kids to experience. You know, can they even name 10 birds, flowers, trees that are native to Saskatchewan in English, let alone in Cree? And do they understand, like, and then they can get into that ethnobotany. So being able to name it and then getting to know it. But again, we're in winter, so we're going to talk a little bit, maybe Nicole will mention about the winter thing we have up our sleeve, but you know, let's be here now, right? We're still in winter, we're still celebrating that. And we can still tell legends, right? As long as the snow is on the ground, we can still share those stories. Because the birds and the flowers aren't sharing their stories yet. And so let's, you know, we can take advantage of that opportunity. The other thing I want to mention is there's a lot of beautiful artists. We had Elder Liz Settee speak with our kids about the importance of tobacco. And in the spring, we'll go out looking for some of the things. But there's Court Donier did some beautiful storytelling for our school division. So there's a lot of people that are doing storytelling. And again, right, we can take that story, go outside, and let's go outside and look for fox tracks, look for different tracks, right? It talked about Nanabozo. Well, where are those snowshoe hare tracks? So again, the kids making those connections.
So Marcia shared one of her favorite resources. To kind of wrap us up tonight, I'm wondering if each of our other panelists could share sort of, if you had the one go-to reference that you use all the time, what would that be? So Nicole, do you have a go-to reference?
Maybe I should be last because I have like 10. So just for the interest of time, maybe let the others share first. And then if we have time, I'll share what I have.
Okay. Sam, have you got anything?
Yeah, I'm going to cheat and I'm not going to answer the question the way that you want me to. But that I would say that the NCCIE is one of my go-tos these days. That's the first place I look most often. But my real go-to resource is my mentor from when I started working. And I'm not saying that just to avoid your question, but because in my experience, that's what you need to sustain yourself in this work, is that person who's a touchstone. And having worked in the outdoor ed community for my whole career, I can really confidently say that if these people are, if you know of someone in your school division, in your community, in your school, who's doing work that inspires you, they're probably the kind of person that would love to take you under their wing and be that point person for you. So I would say my go-to resource is a good mentor and a good friend.
Excellent advice. Elizabeth, do you have a go-to resource that you've seen or worked with?
Yes, it would be my son. He is all things outdoors. He lives in Nebraska, and he runs 2 outdoor businesses of his own that he started from scratch. And when I need to know something or learn something or need help with something, he is my phone call.
Wow, great resource. Okay, Nicole, now it's you. Have you picked one?
I wasn't sure if Marcia had something else you wanted to share.
Oh, Marcia, do you have something else?
Okay, sure. I'll just jump in. Because of COVID, a lot of people have dogs now. And dogs have been fantastic because they make us go outside. And so you might, again, we're filling ourselves up, right? We're think of control theory, right? Glasser's control theory. Love, power, freedom, and fun. And so if we fill ourselves up, and if that puppy dog can help get us outside, we notice the aurora borealis, we can share those stories, and there's that excitement, it's going to spill over to our kids, and we're going to have more confidence and more passion. And it's sharing that sense of wonder. Rachel Carson, you can Google her quote. That's a touchstone as well. See, they're nodding their heads. They know the quote. I'll give it to you quickly. If a child is to keep alive his inborn sense of wonder, he needs the companionship of at least one adult to share the joy, excitement, and mystery of the world we live in. That's Rachel Carson, the sense of wonder.
Beautiful quote.
Okay, I'm ready.
Okay.
Okay, I agree with Sam. Put yourself out there in a staff room meeting or a staff room or at lunch okay, that didn't make sense. In your staff room at lunch or during a meeting, just say, hey, I'm thinking about getting into outdoor learning. Anyone else into that kind of stuff? And then immediately you've got an ally. Like there'll be someone that's like, yeah, even if they're not experienced, I'm kind of thinking about that too. And then you can at least rely on each other to, bounce ideas off of and share resources. Otherwise, at least I know in Saskatoon public and Catholic, I point at Sam. Sam, you're public. That there's often someone, a consultant that is like has outdoor learning as part of their portfolio. They may not necessarily be a full-on expert because they've got 5,000 other portfolios, unless Sam is your person, which she is for the public school division. But they can usually point you in the right direction of who you should contact. Like, hey, person, I hear you're into outdoor learning, consultant, I hear you know things about outdoor learning. Can you put me in contact with someone who would maybe want to mentor me or maybe have some advice to give or whatever? So I agree with Sam, find a person. And then otherwise, I have a bunch of things I'm going to show on my screen, and I'm going to do it real fast so that we're done on time. But I feel like you'll want this because people always like resources, right? Okay, Chris Clark is also another one of those hallmark guys from the public school division who's done so much stuff with outdoor learning. He's right now working on his PhD. He's put together this blog, engagedstudent.weebly.com. I think we're going to put together a list afterwards. So if you're worried about like scribbling real fast, hopefully you don't have to worry about that. I promise I'll put together a list of things and then we'll send it afterwards. But he is starting to compile ideas from teachers of different like kind of straightforward, easy activities. So these are all the different activities. And he's planning on continuing to add to it, particularly throughout his project. And then he's got like advice. Oh, no, that's not what I meant to do. The blog would have advice too, but outdoor learning here, there's a bunch of like information about outdoor learning that you might want to look at. And then the other thing I wanted to point out is he's got a book called All Aboard. When Marsha was talking about initiative tasks, he's got like all sorts of stuff like that in this book. So team builders and icebreakers and communication, blah, blah, blah. Lots of kind of like camp games, but these are really good ways of getting outside that will set your class up for success for the rest of the year. You start the year off with a bunch of this stuff, and then all of a sudden they're like getting along way better than they've ever gotten along. They want to go outside and do more of this kind of stuff, so on. You have to order it from the website. It is kind of expensive, but it's worth it. There's like 300 activities, and you can order it through here. Yeah, it's $40, but worth it. So I'm just gonna point that out, and this website. Also, resources for rethinking, sorry. This website, if you can see up here, resources for rethinking. The website in itself is awesome, and they have tons of lesson plans and like outdoor ed stuff and like climate change and like all sorts of great activities. And this resource I really like. It's called Back into Nature, something like that. And then it starts off with like kind of some background info, which maybe you don't need, but some stuff might be helpful, like a sample letter to your admin for getting outside, a sample parent information letter. Maybe you need those things. The Big 10, that's like their top 10 advice for how to get outside. But then the part that I really like is Nature to Go index and lessons. These are, let's see if I can jump to it, like really simple ideas. So when we're talking, nope. When we're talking about wanting something quick and easy and not having to read a lot, I like these little cue cards because it's like little simple summary of an activity, couple little other additional thoughts, that's it. Gives you something to go with, and they have the grades. And I think they've got like 30 of them. And then they also have more elaborate lesson plans, which to be honest, I don't really like, is too much there, but I like the activities because they're short and sweet. So this website and this resource, if you're early years people love this resource. This woman you can follow on Instagram, Raising Little Shoots, I think is her handle. I don't know anything about Instagram, but supposedly she posts really good stuff. And then she's got this resource, which is just a PDF, but it has ways of getting outside all year round. And they're kind of thematic. So here's just a preview. You would have to buy this as well. I think it's like $15 to honor her work. So like throughout the autumn, winter, and so on, she's got all these themes of things you could follow. And wait, let's scroll down. So for example, winter tree study. She gives you a bit of info on like what to look for winter trees. Skip that part, that's not relevant. But then she's got some books for suggestion. And then she's got like a poem that's related to trees. She's got extension activities, other things you can do. And they're just like, excuse me, one sentence. I'm doing my chipmunk voice. Sorry, everyone. I'm doing it for you. Some really quick little activities as additional things. Anyways, it's pretty cool. It's pretty easy to use. And like, a beginner can use it. It's nothing too fancy, but it is early learning. So yes, check that out. Another awesome outdoor ed person with Sask Outdoors, I think she might be the president now, put together this little PD, which is awesome because she also left it as an ongoing resource. So it's like a Google Doc that you can access. And she goes through as well the months. Sorry, I'm trying to skip down quicker to the good stuff. Okay, so she goes kind of through the months, and then she has like little activities. She's got some links. She's got some safety tips, other advice, and it's like little small bits. And then there's really good little ideas on here too. And she goes through the whole year. So it's another good way of getting started. And Meewasin, Sam and I worked on some resources for Meewasin this year. So if you go on their website, They have educational resources. This is one of them. This is the cheat sheets that my participants thought would be really helpful. So Sam made this one. This is all about winter. So she talks about some different winter ecology factors you want to think about. There's some diagrams and like little pictures that you can use for talking points with students when they're outside. Signs of subnivean, adaptations of trees, what to look for trees, to ID them, their buds. Like, it's just really good. Sam did a really good job on this one. And so I think there's 5 of these. There's like an animal one, aquatic invertebrates, decomposers, rocks, winter, and then eventually we'll add a couple more. We just haven't finished them yet. And so there's other things like this on Meewasin website under their educational resources. Unfortunately, you have to like enter your email or something to get them, but I swear they're worth it. Hopefully you think so. And I'm almost there, people. Oh, I have to promote my own stuff. I'm putting together this resource hub. So like I said, my participants were like, why can't everything just be in one spot? So our division is putting together these like PowerPoints that are linked to other info. So I made one for outdoor learning, and this is going to be shared on the McDowell website when I share my research. I'm just not totally done it yet. So the main themes are getting started. So some advice, how do you plan an excursion, locations to go in Saskatoon and area, what kind of gear should you be thinking about, resources that are good, activities you might want to try. And then you can either, these are all hyperlinked, sorry. These are all hyperlinked, but I'm just going to scroll you through, walking through it. So then each area that has certain themes. So these are like the sub pages. So planning an excursion, I talk about money, talk about weather, transportation, so on, different locations around the city, gear you might want to think about, resources, and activities. And I'm hoping the activities is the most useful for you. It's curriculum linked, so I'll just get down to that area. So kindergarten, I've got like a specific outcome in a subject area and then an activity. You click on this and it takes you to the activity. So I've tried to make them really short, condensed things, or it's linked to a website that I think does a pretty good job. So either I've made something or there's a link. Some that might be videos as well, but the idea was that it was like short, easy, quick. So this will be on McDowell eventually. And if you don't like PowerPoint format, it's also going to be made into PDF. I've got a graphic designer working on it. It's all the same information I just talked about, except in a PDF form. So he's just in the middle of working on it. It's going to look snazzy, I can tell already. So that will also be available on McDowell website. A lot of the stuff we mentioned in there, like all the resources we just mentioned, I think most of those are under the resources section. So, and have I forgotten anything? Oh, apps. We mentioned a few apps. Nature Companion is really, really good. Eco-Friendly Sask put it together. It's free. It's awesome. Google it. It's also a website. And Merlin Bird ID is good for birds. iNaturalist is good for all nature. Field Guides picks them up. And okay, that's good enough. That's it.
Your passion is exciting and invigorating, and we appreciate it. But in the interest of time, we got to cut you off.
Yep.
I will make a plug for STF, the Emma Stewart Resource Center. I saw Marcia put that in the chat as well. There's lots of resources there. And we also have a workshop coming up next week on Tuesday. Marcia is one of our facilitators for a 1-hour session on getting your kids outside in the winter. So if you'd like, you're welcome to sign up for that. That's, if you go to the STF events calendar, you'll find the link for that. And with that, I want to thank Nicole and Sam and Marcia for joining us in the middle of report card season. And thank you, Elizabeth. I know that things are a bit crazy in your corner of STF as well. So thank you all for agreeing to join us tonight and share your knowledge and your passion and your energy. So we really appreciate it. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ellen to wrap it up.
Thank you so much, Nicole. I just want to echo the thank you that you've already done to our panelists. It always amazes me. I email teachers and I know what you all have going on, and y'all email back and say yes. And it just astounds me, and it speaks to the profession, and it speaks to your passion and to your dedication. I want to extend that to Nicole Turcotte as well. Nicole and I were in a meeting together, and I raised this, and I get an email from her saying, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "Oh, do you want to moderate?" And she's like, "Sure." I'm like, "Wow, that was easy." So again, I'm very grateful that it always astounds me. I'm not a teacher, I'm a sociologist by training. What astounds me about working in this profession is teachers say yes. When things get tough, teachers step forward. When pandemics happen, teachers take their kids outside and do amazing things. So thank you all for the time and effort you've put into this. The McDowell Foundation is really about highlighting the amazing work that teachers do. Nicole is such a great example. She put in an application a couple of years ago. She wasn't totally sure what she wanted to do, and she came out with something so fantastic. And I can't wait to share all of the stuff she's putting together on the McDowell website. It's going to be such a great thing. So if you're thinking about, I could do something like this, or like Marcia. Marcia was one of our researchers a while ago. She called me one day and said, hey, I just did this interview and I thought about McDowell. And that's the amazing thing about McDowell, is it just pulls everyone back together. So if you're thinking about, maybe I could do something like this, reach out to me. I'd love to support you in doing some action research. Also give some thought to we are a nonprofit organization. So if you want to see stuff like this continue, feel free to maybe toss $1 or $2 our way. You can go onto the McDowell website to look at how to do those kinds of donations. So thank you for your time. Thank you for your passion. Thank you for your energy. And thank you for giving up your Thursday evening to sit inside and hang out with us instead of getting out and enjoying the beautiful weather. So enjoy tomorrow, enjoy the weekend, and we really appreciate you taking the time to join us tonight. So have a good night, everyone. Again, we so appreciate you being here, and we will talk soon. The next Salon series will happen in April, and our hope is it'll focus on some of the learning that's come out of the directed call on teaching in a pandemic. So thank you, and we will see you then.